Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Ben here, and I'm back again today doing another video. Today I'm actually going back to talking about the NBA, which I really haven't for a while, but I will be today. I've been thinking the type of videos that I probably enjoy the most, I'd say, are trade scenario videos, and so today I'm back with a trade scenario video for Kyle Lowry. He's going to be an expiring contract this year, so I think Toronto, if they aren't doing very well, they may look to trade him. They also have Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol also on expiring contracts, so this team could potentially look a lot different come the midway point or the end of the season based on how they feel about holding a ton of expiring contracts. But with that in mind, I figured I'd put together some trade scenarios for Kyle Lowry because he is still an impact player in this league, and I think a lot of teams can still be looking for a quality point guard. To look at his stats for last year, just to give you all a frame of reference. Last year, he shot 41% from the field and 35% from three, so really un, unimpressive from the field and average from three. He averaged 14 points a game and 9 assists, and he's a player who I think opinions are very are varied on him quite a bit. And some people see him as like a perennial all-star who's super good. Some people see him as a guy who really just benefits from playing with on a good team, and he's just like a result of getting all-star appearances based on that. He is a five-time all-star. He's made the last five all-star games. Um, I see him as a good player, but maybe like a second or third best player on a championship team. Like last year, you'd probably say he was like the third best player on that team because Pascal really emerged as the second best player. So yeah, I think like a third best player on a championship team is really where he's at. I took all this into consideration when coming up with some of these trades. So without further ado, let's get into it. In trade number one, I have the Toronto Raptors sending Kyle Lowry and their first round pick for next year to the Orlando Magic for Evan Fournier and Terrence Ross. So you might see it'll be a theme in this video, but a lot of the trades I set up for Toronto were based around them really needing wing depth. Between losing both Danny Green and Kawhi, they're very, very thin on the wings, so they're definitely going to need to replace those two guys. So for those reasons, I think Fournier and Terrence Ross make a lot of sense. As for the Magic, they really lack a good starting point guard. I don't think Markelle Fultz is reliable enough to be a starter consistently, and DJ Augustine is really much more of a career backup than an actual starter in this league. So they could really use somebody, and I think Kyle Lowry comes into play there. Besides that, I think that the Magic might feel like they're giving up a lot just to get Kyle Lowry back, who may be on a 1 year deal. So I also threw in Toronto's first round pick for next year because I think that they'll need something to sweeten the pot for them. But I think this benefits both teams. You know, what Toronto needs is wing depth, and what the Magic needs is an NBA quality starting point guard. So I think both teams get a need addressed. The next trade I have here is Kyle Lowry to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Tim Hardaway Jr., Courtney Lee, and the Mavericks 2025 first round pick. So why does Dallas do this trade? Well, they have a plenty of wing depth right now between um, like DeLon Wright, who can play some shooting guard, um, Seth Curry, who can play shooting guard. They've got Doncic at the small forward. They've got Dorian Finney-Smith at small forward. So they've got plenty of wings, and they don't really need Tim Hardaway Jr. or Courtney Lee. But what they do really need is a quality point guard because I think as things stand right now, the point guard that would be starting would be Jalen Brunson. I think that they could really use a step up over him. So for those reasons, I could see them going after Kyle Lowry here. He'd really make a nice third option to that and like create a big three with him as the third peg between Doncic, Porzingis, and him. So I think that that would work pretty well. As for Toronto, same thing here. They need wing depth with losing both Danny Green and Kawhi. So I have them getting Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee, two guys that could play either wing position. And then also I think that they might think that those guys aren't good enough because Courtney Lee has been regressing a bit the past couple of years, and I don't think Tim Hardaway Jr. for Kyle Lowry straight up. I don't think that Toronto would go for that really. So I included a first round pick just to sweeten the pot for Toronto. But again, makes sense on both sides for me. Next, I think this is a trade where Toronto's probably getting stiffed the most of any trade. I have Kyle Lowry going to the Pistons in exchange for Detroit's 2021 first round pick, Luke Kennard, Tony Snell, and Reggie Jackson. So I'll break this down. Reggie Jackson's basically in here just because they need the salaries to match. I don't think Toronto really wants him, but he could start for them because he would be replacing Kyle Lowry. I don't know how that would work with him and Van Fleet, who would start or who wouldn't, but they'd at least have a replacement on the roster for Lowry as far as depth. Tony Snell and Luke Kennard are again addressing wing depth problems that Toronto has currently. And then the first round pick is just because I think Toronto um, isn't really getting that one player that sets us apart. It's more about like collecting depth. And I think that just getting depth isn't really enough for them because none of these players really pop. Um, so I think from that perspective, getting a 2021 first would really sweeten the pot for them. And then as for Detroit, Reggie Jackson I don't think was a that great of a point guard for them. I think Kyle Lowry's a higher IQ player, and he just is more battle tested. And I've heard that Reggie Jackson's a bit of a goof off, and he's not super serious about winning all the time. That's just what I've heard from an interview with Blake Griffin. But I think Kyle Lowry would be a really good leader for this locker room that really could use some leadership at this point. Next, I have a trade where Kyle Lowry is going to the Nuggets in exchange for Gary Harris and Mason Plumlee. You may think like that's not fair value at all, but to me, I think it's pretty fair actually. Mason Plumlee, I think, makes sense from the perspective that Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol are going to be leaving after this year, most likely, because their contracts are going to expire. So it gives Toronto some insurance to have a guy down low to put in the starting lineup next year next to Pascal. As far as Gary Harris, he's an up-and-coming shooting guard. He can help with the depth at the wing spot that I've been talking about throughout this video. He's good for, I think, on this Toronto team, he could average like somewhere between 15 to 20 points per game, depending on how they want to use him. And overall, I think he's just way younger than Kyle Lowry, and that's something you have to factor in here. I think Gary Harris is like 23 or 24, to Lowry's like 34, so I think that that's valuable. As for the Nuggets, why would they do this trade? Well, I think right now, for what they need, Kyle Lowry may be better than Gary Harris. And Jamal Murray can play shooting guard just fine, so you could slot in a starting lineup that looks like Kyle Lowry at the 1, Jamal Murray at the 2, Will Barton or Michael Carter, or excuse me, not Michael Carter Williams, Michael Porter at the 3. At the 4, you'd have Millsap, and at the 5, you'd have Jokic. I think that like in the regular season, they might do a bit worse because I think maybe Kyle Lowry being an older player takes a few more nights off, but I think in the playoffs they'd have more of an experienced player who, although Lowry has been known to melt down a bit in the playoffs sometimes, he still has that experience from winning a championship this last year to draw on, and I think that that can be valuable. Okay, and lastly, the last of my 5 trades, I have the Pelicans trading with the Raptors, and I have the Pelicans getting Kyle Lowry, and the Raptors getting Derek Favors, Darius Miller, Etuan Moore, and a 2020 Pelicans first round pick. Again, a trade kind of like the Detroit one where initially it might not make much sense, but hear me out here. So Derek Favors is a guy who can average 15 and 10 for you. And with Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka going to be free agents, again, I think it makes sense for them to try and get some insurance and replenish their depth in the post, which Derek Favors can do, and he could slot in pretty well as a center next to Pascal Siakam next year. Darius Miller and Etuan Moore are replacing wing depth, and Etuan Moore can. Darius Miller is very more of a defensive player than offensive. Offensive, he's maybe good for like 6 points a night, but defensive, he's pretty solid. And Etuan Moore on defense is average, but on offense can be good for like between 10 to 12 points a night, which could be exactly what they need, just somebody to be not a threat, but at least like somebody you have to guard on the wing. And then the 2020 first round pick is just because I think Toronto, again, wouldn't be as impressed by the players and they'd feel like they need a sweetener in this, so I put in that. As for the Pelicans, you might be saying, well, they just got Lonzo. Why do they need Kyle Lowry? Well, I think that a 3-headed monster of Lowry, Lonzo, and Drew could be very effective, and I really like the idea of a closing lineup of both Kyle Lowry and Drew Holiday, and then maybe like Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Jackson Hayes, something like that. I think that that could be pretty effective. or you could go really small ball and you could have something out there like Zion at small ball center, Ingram at small ball power forward, maybe like Josh Hart at the 3, and then um, you could have Holiday and Kyle Lowry. I don't know. I just trust Kyle Lowry more than Lonzo at this point, and I think the Pelicans actually might be looking to contend right now. And I think Lonzo's still like about 2 years away from being the player that we expect him to be. And so for a team trying to contend right now, it could be an option to bring in a more experienced guy. These are just trades that I came up with off the top of my head. It wasn't super easy to come up with a trade for Lowry because he is making so much money. But let me know what you guys think and propose your own trades down below in the comments if you feel like it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and hope you have a good day. Bye.